Good day. Nice to meet ya. Let's just get started, I guess. The Lord of the Rings books, the cultural impact they've had is immense. I think that they were big for a lot of nerds and a lot of niche fantasy fans at the time. But when the movies came out, I think that's when it really exploded. I mean, a lot of fantasy just came from like the original Lord of the Rings books, but I think every story, any fantasy story in some aspect has been influenced by the Lord of the Rings in some way. So I want to go over today, especially over the movies, like why were they so good? What made them just fantastic? And why do I feel the need to watch 12 hours of the Lord of the Rings every year? And sometimes the Hobbits, if I'm feeling the Hobbit movies, if I'm feeling good. Why? Why am I not the only one in that? Let's go into it a little bit. In any story, if you don't have good characters, then it becomes really hard to care about. And the Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings has some of the best, most well-developed characters. And the dialogue between them is insane how good it actually is. I mean, I can go deep dive into characters and all that stuff like that, but this is what I want to say about characters. Characters are only as good as their struggle. And if a character has a good opposing struggle, then they become immediately more relatable. Doesn't matter if it's in a fantasy, sci-fi setting. If you have a relatable character, then your story is going to mean something. So let's go over a few of the characters in The Lord of the Rings and what makes them so awesome. So number one, main character, Frodo. He is a saint. He is a saint among men. He is the epitome of pure and good. You really get a sense of that in the first movie when he's in the Shire, and also in the third movie. There's this scene that happens where Sam holds the ring for like an hour or two. We don't really know how long, but not that long. And he struggles a little bit to give it back to Frodo. Sam at this point has been the best character. He's just loyal. He's awesome. He's great. But to see him struggle to give the ring back, and Frodo has been carrying it for months, and he's still taking it like a champ. That's epic. And you see, at like the first few times I watched this when I was younger, I thought he was just like a weak noodle, but he is one of the most courageous people in this. And this is why I say this. This is why I think Frodo is the main character. It's because we all have struggles. We all go through things, and 9 times out of 10, actually I'd say even more than that, it's something going on internally. And that's what the ring does to Frodo. It gives him this strong, powerful internal struggle that he has to deal with on a daily basis for, I think, lasts about 6 months. For these 6 months. And just to see how he treats people and how he acts, why he's going through the struggle is very, for one, relatable. Like that scene, I think somewhere in the second one where Sam is speaking to him about Gollum and he kind of lashes out at him. Like there's things like that where you see him and you say, I get it. I get it. I understand what you're going through. Like when he's the last thing I'll say on this is that when he has compassion for Smeagol or Gollum, and a lot of people are like, why? Like that's ridiculous. Like they need to get rid of him. Me too, honestly, when I'm watching the movies. But if you look at him, you understand like Frodo is going through something horrific. What turned Smeagol into Gollum was the same thing that Frodo's going through right now. So that's what gives him compassion. All right, Sam, the number 2, a wonderful guy. He is not only the friend we all need, but the friend we all need to be. He is loyal, kind, supportive, and I think the greatest trait that he has is that he's willing to be completely honest with his friend about what he's thinking. But at the same time, after he shares his honest opinion, he supports his friend anyway. Like that's just the mark of a really good man right there. Aragorn, he's just the guy that we all want to be. He's awesome, he's handsome, he's kind, he's smart. He's all of these amazing things, and he is predestined to be the king of Gondor. But yeah, he has some reluctance in there. Honestly, I don't know why he's such a compelling character. Like his maybe it's his relationships. I don't know. He's just cool. I don't know what makes him so cool. I couldn't figure it out, but I just threw him in there because I love him. And Viggo Mortensen, I think that's how you say his name. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. He just does an amazing job. That's all I gotta say. That's it. Boromir. Boromir is I love Boromir. I'm sad what happens to him. It breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart. This is the thing. He and his men have been fighting and dying to protect the whole of Middle Earth from the forces of Mordor for probably as long as Boromir's been alive, probably forever. So when they're all in the council and Boromir wants to use the ring against Mordor, that makes sense. It's like a powerful ring. Yes, he's like, I'm tired of this garbage. Like, let's use it against them. Then he gets convinced out of that because he comes to understand, the ring can only be used by Sauron. Like, that's the only way it can be used. So he's like, all right, fine, scrap that idea. Let's destroy it. But then the ring starts to get into his mind and starts to feed these thoughts of maybe he's right, and starts to feed him more and more and more until he breaks and he makes a decision he wish he hadn't. And I think that's an understandable thing for all people. I feel like in every moment, like in everybody's lives, there's a few moments where we're just like, why did I do that? That's so against me. That's so against who I am and what I do and what I stand for. Yet I did something so stupid. Like, that's what Boromir did. And so everybody likes to hate on him. But honestly, he just bad moment, bad timing. And I think he redeems himself. I definitely think he redeems himself.
What have I done? Please, Frodo.
So I'm not going to go through all the characters, but there's a few character moments that I just want to hit on real quick. First, Theoden, King of Rohan, takes his people to Helm's Deep because Gondor hasn't been any help recently, and people are coming, and the orcs are coming to kill them. It's a bad idea. They should ask for help, or they should go to Gondor, or something like that. But Theoden thinks Helm's Deep has never fallen. Odds aren't in their favor at all. They shouldn't. It's a bad idea, but it makes sense for his character, and that's great. I love when they do that. There's more. I'll just keep going. Aragorn sticks by his men. It sticks by mankind, even though the odds are against them. Frodo and Sam leave the rest of the group because they fear that they're endangering them. Merry goes into the Battle of Gondor at the very end. This little halfling runs out there. See, these are all bad decisions, but they're decisions that real people made. See, when you're watching a movie and you cringe at someone's decision, that means it's probably not for their character, or their character is not well developed because they just made a stupid decision to push the plot along. But then you have a character who makes a bad decision that is well developed, and you mostly just feel bad for them. Like, you see, like, Frodo not wanting to kill Gollum, not wanting to, get rid of him, send him off. You just feel bad for Frodo. You're like, oh gosh. But if Frodo wasn't a well-developed character and he was just doing that to keep Gollum along and just push the plot along just because he needed to make that decision, that would be cringy. But the fact that, he's going through the struggle and he chooses poorly to bring Gollum along, like, that's wild. All right, done with characters. Let's go on to themes. Anyway, okay, so there's a lot of themes in Lord of the Rings, like in any story, but the one that sticks out to me the most is hope. So throughout the movies, every group you follow, every story you follow has an underlining of hope. And the way that Tolkien and Peter Jackson portray hope in Middle-earth is a little different than I think what we often associate with hope. I think usually we're like, oh man, I hope it doesn't rain, or oh man, I hope I can get that car. It's like a wish with like underlying pessimism. It's like, man, that would be cool if that happened, but it probably won't happen. But the hope that they're talking about, the way they use it, is a little different. I think the best explanation is Sam's quote at the end of The Two Towers, because it's probably one of the most amazing, at least one of my favorite quotes in all of movies.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Hope isn't wishing for something against the odds. It's fighting for what good can come under any circumstance. The mankind and the elves at Helm's Deep, they said, all hope is lost. Aragorn said,
There's always hope.
He knows that even though the odds are against them, you can either give in to despair and let yourself die, or fight for the possibility, even if you can't see what it is, the possibility that some good can happen. All right, that's it. That's it for themes. Last thing. The production of the films, insane. These movies literally were miracles. Like, they could not and would not be done today how they were done like they were. I'll explain. First off, Lord of the Rings was not like a sought after intellectual property or IP. It wasn't sought after. Nobody was making fantasy movies for like adults, like these big action packed things. They're usually for kids. Nobody was really making trilogies. It wasn't like something that people were doing or even wanted to do. And fantasy nerds and geeks and all that stuff were pretty undercover. Not like it wasn't as big as it is nowadays. So you have Peter Jackson, who's the only movies he's made so far are low budget horror movies. So keep that in mind as we continue. So Peter Jackson had this dream to turn these awesome books into movies. And he knew the pitch was hard, so he said he could cram it down into 2 movies. He can do that. So he went from production company to production company. One even tried to take it away from him, because he wouldn't do one movie. And they're like, if you don't do one movie, we'll take it away from you. But I don't know how he got around that. Anyway, the last production company he went to, they sat down and they essentially were like, so you want to make 2 movies, but there's 3 books. Why don't you just do 3 movies? Like nowadays you're like, oh, that sounds fine. That sounds normal. That's just what happens. That's not how it worked. And need I remind you that this was a director who hadn't directed a whole lot, and what he had directed was very low budget. And this next thing, how much money they gave him blows my mind. So I got the numbers right here so I can just get it accurately. They gave Peter Jackson $281 million to make these movies. Now that's about average for a blockbuster film today, like a big film. This was 20 years ago though. Avatar 2, The Way of Water, or whatever you want to call it, was given $250 million. And James Cameron is a well-known director, and pretty much anything he wants to make, he's going to get the budget for it. 281 20 years ago would be about what is it, 453 million in today's numbers. So Peter Jackson, an unknown horror director, was given $453 million to make 12 hours of content. That just would not happen today. there, I don't understand it. I'm so glad it happened, and I wish it would happen more. I want to make a video on how I think Marvel movies could benefit from that kind of mindset. But anyway, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And so the fact that it happened is a miracle, an absolute miracle. I think one of the last miracles I want to talk about is just the actual talent on set, in pre-production, with all the miniatures that they made. They even called them bigatures because these miniatures were so big and so massive, was so intense. And then you have all your actors and set designers and costume designers doing a fantastic job, amazing, incredible job. And then you have the post-production, which created a software to be able to handle the large battle sequences in Lord of the Rings. They created a software for these movies. Looking back, seeing how old these movies are, looking at the CGI, it's absolutely fantastic. It still holds up. It's incredible. So the last thing I'll say on this is that this movie took 438 days to just film. That was just like filming production. Most movies take like 3 months. So the fact that he was able to get away with this still blows my mind. I know I've said that 1,000 times, but I don't understand it. So, of course, to end, this is something I could ramble about for a long time, but we just got all the good stuff in there. Essentially, it's just a movie about a bunch of awesome guys looking out for each other, fighting against the perils of the world. What can get better than that? That's something to cry for. Anyway, hope you guys have a fantastic day. I'll see you later. Lord of the Rings shirt. I'm wearing my Lord of the Rings shirt, by the way. You can't see it. I thought you were going to be able to see it, but that's fine.